From Tsar to Revolution, the seeds of change. Russia, 1917. A nation on the brink. The Romanov dynasty, a dynasty that had ruled for centuries, teetered on the edge of collapse. World War I had ravaged the country, leaving it depleted and demoralized. The Tsar, Nicholas II, seemed unable to grasp the gravity of the situation. He clung to autocracy, blind to the simmering discontent of his people. The year 1917 witnessed the February Revolution. The streets of Petrograd, the imperial capital, became a sea of protesters. Workers, soldiers and peasants, united by hunger and hardship, demanded change. The Tsar, facing overwhelming opposition, abdicated. The Romanov dynasty, once seemingly invincible, was no more. From the ashes of the old regime, a provisional government emerged, attempting to fill the void left by the Tsar's abdication. However, it proved weak and indecisive, unable to quell the unrest that gripped the nation. Russia, once a mighty empire, teetered on the precipice of chaos. In the shadows, a new force was gathering strength. The Bolsheviks, led by the exiled revolutionary Vladimir Lenin. Lenin, a charismatic and ruthless leader, saw an opportunity in the chaos. He promised peace, land, and bread, a message that resonated deeply with the weary and disillusioned populace. Lenin, returning from exile, rallied the masses with his fiery rhetoric. The Bolsheviks, once a fringe party, gained widespread support. Their message of radical change, of a society built on Marxist principles, resonated with the discontented masses. Russia, exhausted from war and revolution, was ripe for transformation. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power in a swift and decisive coup. The provisional government, weak and divided, crumbled before them. Lenin, now the undisputed leader of Russia, wasted no time in consolidating his grip on power. He established a dictatorship of the proletariat, a one-party state ruled by the Communist Party. The Bolsheviks, determined to create a new socialist utopia, embarked on a radical transformation of Russian society. They nationalized industries, collectivized agriculture, and suppressed all opposition. The old order, with its inequalities and injustices, was to be swept away, replaced by a new egalitarian society. The Russian Civil War erupted, a brutal and bloody conflict that pitted the Bolsheviks against a coalition of White Army forces supported by foreign powers who feared the spread of communism. The Bolsheviks, despite facing overwhelming odds, emerged victorious, securing their hold on power. A new era had dawned in Russia, an era of communist rule. Lenin's death in 1924 triggered a power struggle within the Communist Party. From the shadows emerged Joseph Stalin, a ruthless and ambitious figure. Stalin, through cunning and ruthlessness, outmaneuvered his rivals, consolidating his power and establishing himself as the new dictator of the Soviet Union, formed in 1922. Stalin embarked on a brutal program of forced industrialization and collectivized agriculture. He believed that the Soviet Union, lagging behind the West, needed to rapidly industrialize to compete on the world stage. He implemented his 5-year plans, aiming to transform the Soviet Union from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. The human cost of Stalin's policies was staggering. Millions of peasants were forcibly removed from their lands and herded into collective farms. Those who resisted faced imprisonment, exile, or execution. The collectivization of agriculture led to widespread famine, with millions perishing from starvation. Stalin's reign of terror extended far beyond the countryside. He launched the Great Purge, a campaign of political repression that targeted anyone perceived as a threat to his power. Millions were arrested, imprisoned in labor camps known as gulags, or executed. The Soviet Union, under Stalin's iron fist, became a totalitarian state where fear and paranoia reigned supreme. The spectre of war descended upon Europe in 1939. Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland. marking the beginning of World War II. The Soviet Union, initially allied with Germany through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, watched with wary eyes as Hitler's armies marched across Europe. In 1941, Hitler, betraying his pact with Stalin, unleashed Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The German army, confident of a swift victory, plunged deep into Soviet territory, capturing vast swathes of land and inflicting heavy casualties. The Soviet people, facing an existential threat, rallied behind Stalin. The Red Army, though initially caught off guard, fought back with fierce determination. The Battle of Stalingrad, a brutal and protracted siege, became a turning point in the war. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad marked the beginning of the end for the Nazi war machine. The Soviet Union's wartime sacrifices were immense. Millions of its citizens, soldiers and civilians alike, perished in the conflict. The country's infrastructure lay in ruins, its economy shattered. Yet from the ashes of war, the Soviet Union emerged as a global superpower, its military might and ideological conviction undeniable. Section 5. Cold War Superpower, from Sputnik to Proxy Wars. The aftermath of World War II saw the emergence of a bipolar world order dominated by two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These ideological rivals, one capitalist, the other communist, engaged in a global struggle for influence known as the Cold War. The Cold War was a multifaceted conflict fought on multiple fronts: ideological, economic and technological. The space race, a competition for supremacy in space exploration, became a symbol of this rivalry. The Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite in 1957, sent shockwaves through the Western world. Both superpowers, wary of direct conflict, engaged in proxy wars, supporting their respective allies in regional conflicts. From Korea to Vietnam, from Afghanistan to Angola, the Cold War played out in the battlefields of the developing world, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev and Leonid Brezhnev, maintained its grip on Eastern Europe, establishing satellite states and suppressing any dissent with an iron fist. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, became a potent symbol of the Cold War divide, separating East and West Berlin, communist and capitalist. In Section 6, cracks in the facade, stagnation and dissent. Behind the facade of Soviet strength and unity, cracks began to appear. The Soviet economy, burdened by centralized planning and military spending, stagnated. Shortages of consumer goods became commonplace, leading to growing discontent among the population. Dissident voices, once silenced by fear and repression, began to emerge. Intellectuals, artists, and ordinary citizens, disillusioned with the Soviet system, dared to speak out against its failings. Andrei Sakharov, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and other dissidents became powerful voices of dissent, challenging the official narrative and exposing the dark underbelly of Soviet society. The Soviet Union's intervention in Afghanistan in 1979 proved to be a costly miscalculation. The war, a brutal and protracted conflict, drained Soviet resources and further exposed the weaknesses of the Soviet military. The Afghan Mujahideen, supported by the United States and other Western powers, fought fiercely against the Soviet invaders. The Chernobyl disaster in 1986, a catastrophic nuclear accident at a power plant in Ukraine, further eroded public confidence in the Soviet government. The disaster, a consequence of bureaucratic incompetence and systemic flaws, exposed the shortcomings of the Soviet system and its inability to deal with crises effectively. Section 7, Gorbachevs Gamble, Perestroika and Glasnost. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power as the General Secretary of the Communist Party. Gorbachev, a relatively young and reform-minded leader, recognized the urgent need for change. He initiated a series of reforms known as perestroika, or restructuring, and glasnost, or openness. Perestroika aimed to revitalize the stagnant Soviet economy by introducing elements of market mechanisms while maintaining the Communist Party's control. Glasnost, on the other hand, aimed to increase transparency and openness in government and society. Gorbachev believed that by allowing greater freedom of expression and debate, he could revitalize Soviet society and regain public trust. Gorbachev's reforms, however, unleashed forces that he could not control. The relaxation of censorship led to an outpouring of criticism of the Soviet system, exposing decades of repression and hypocrisy. Nationalist sentiments, long suppressed under Soviet rule, resurfaced with a vengeance in the republics of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's attempts to reform the Soviet system from within ultimately proved futile. The forces he unleashed, once unleashed, could not be contained. The Soviet Union, weakened by internal contradictions and external pressures, was on the verge of collapse. Section 8, The Iron Curtain Falls, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The year 1991 witnessed the dramatic and swift collapse of the Soviet Union. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were the first to declare their independence, breaking away from the crumbling empire. Other Soviet republics soon followed suit, eager to assert their own national identities. In August 1991, hardline communists, opposed to Gorbachev's reforms and fearing the disintegration of the Soviet Union, staged a coup, placing Gorbachev under house arrest. The coup, however, backfired spectacularly. Boris Yeltsin, the newly elected president of the Russian Republic, rallied the people of Moscow against the coup plotters. The failed coup dealt a fatal blow to the already weakened Soviet state. The Soviet Union, once a superpower that had instilled fear and admiration in equal measure, dissolved into 15 independent states. The Cold War, which had defined global politics for decades, came to an end. The collapse of the Soviet Union had profound implications for the world. It marked the end of the Cold War and the triumph of liberal democracy over communism. It also led to a new era of uncertainty and instability as the world adjusted to a new geopolitical reality. Section 9, Legacies of a Superpower, Reflections on a Bygone Era. The Soviet Union is gone, but its legacy continues to shape the world we live in. The rise and fall of this communist superpower offer valuable lessons about the dangers of totalitarianism, the importance of individual liberty, and the enduring power of national identity. The Soviet experiment, for all its flaws and failures, left an indelible mark on history. It demonstrated the transformative power of ideology, the allure of utopian visions, and the seductive appeal of revolutionary change. It also exposed the dark underbelly of totalitarian regimes, the human cost of unchecked power, and the corrosive effects of fear and repression. The collapse of the Soviet Union serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of empires, the importance of adaptability, and the need to address the grievances of the governed. It also reminds us that history is not linear, that progress is not inevitable, and that the future is always uncertain. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, we would do well to remember the lessons of the past. The rise and fall of the Soviet Union, a tale of ambition, idealism, repression, and ultimately collapse, offers a stark reminder of the enduring human capacity for both good and evil.